Hello, my name is Andrew Waxler. I'm a cardiologist with Penn State Health. I'm actually clinical assistant professor of medicine at the Penn State College of Medicine. But more pertinent to today's talk, I am the president of the Pennsylvania State Chapter of the American College of Cardiology, and I'm the governor sitting on the ACC Board of Governors representing Eastern Pennsylvania. I've had the good fortune of being involved in advocacy, both at the local, state, and national levels for many years. Certainly in the last decade, I've really been blessed to spend a lot of time in Harrisburg and Washington doing state and national advocacy respectively. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to spend the next 20 or 25 minutes talking about cardiovascular advocacy, particularly during the COVID-19 crisis. And as I like to say, it's always better to be sitting at the table rather than to be part of the meal. Again, there's my titles. It's important that we point out that this was taped on June 8th. It should be released in a few days. And the things we're going to talk about, I do believe will be pertinent for several weeks, if not months. But I do have to say that whenever you're watching this, it was indeed recorded June 8th. CVI Heartbites is produced by CVI. And unfortunately, we are not able to offer CME credit. Hopefully, this will be a worthwhile investment of your time just for the education. And here's my title and all my titles associated with my name. So we're going to take the first 5 or 10 minutes and talk about the plethora of advocacy issues that the Pennsylvania State Chapter of the ACC has been wrestling with for the last 2-3 years. And these were the ones that were really on the forefront of our radar before COVID-19 hit us in March. Just really quickly, we're going to go through each of these in a little bit of detail, but just you can read the letter, the list: prior authorization, Act 112, the high school CPR law, the Tobacco 21 law, some high school EKG legislation, which is in the pipeline, some legislation from the radiology techs that's in the pipeline, venue shifting, informed consent, and some interesting discussions we've had with Highmark, which we can certainly get into. So really briefly, just to talk about prior authorization for a couple of minutes, those of you involved in advocacy in Pennsylvania, or even those of you familiar with advocacy in Pennsylvania, probably have heard plenty about prior authorization. Simply put, it's been a major focus of our attention since about 2010, 2011. I'm part of maybe a half dozen people that are cardiologists in Pennsylvania that have really focused on trying to make some inroads in this. And we've had a small amount of success, but unfortunately not a lot, which is kind of disappointing, but we're trying. This was our bill in the last legislative session in Harrisburg, 2017, 2018. This was introduced by Marguerite Quinn and unfortunately went to the insurance committee where it died. What do we want and what are some of our goals? Well, we want standardized, transparent, scientifically rigorous guidelines for things such as stress tests. A stress cardiolite study should be the same whether or not you have Aetna or Highmark or Capital or Medicare or UPMC insurance. In other words, if a person fits a certain criteria and he or she warrants a stress test, it really shouldn't matter what insurance you have. But believe it or not, all these different insurance companies, and more often than not, they're middlemen, what they call RBMs, radiation benefit managers, who kind of are the middlemen between the insurance company and us. They're hired by the insurance company as sort of a insulation, if you will. They each have their own criteria. A lot of times the criteria are different between the various insurance companies, and a lot of times they are not available for us. So we want the same criteria to be used. We want scientifically rigorous and proven criteria. A perfect example would be the AUC, the appropriate use criteria, which the ACC was very wise and foresaw the future in developing these about 15 years ago or so. We want consistency among the insurance companies. We want transparency. We want accountability. So the insurance industry should be accountable if one particular company is causing a lot of denials. And the thing of it is, if we can get decent prior authorization reform, we will actually hit all 4 points of the ACC quadruple aim, which was discussed by one of my role models, Mike Valentine, who was the president of the ACC 2 years ago. You can see him in the bottom right corner. To improve the patient experience for the individual patient, improve the overall population health for the society, decrease healthcare costs, and improve physician well-being. Adequate prior authorization reform will hit all 4 of these. So we do have 2 bills that are currently in the legislature. There's one in the House, I'll show you in a second, and one in the Senate. We are collaborating with HAP, which is the Hospital Association of Pennsylvania. We are collaborating with Pennsylvania Medical Society. We are collaborating with something called the PA Prior Auth Step Coalition, which actually is an arm of the Arthritis Foundation, and they have taken the ball and run with it, which is wonderful. So we are part of a large coalition of interested parties, most of whom are different physician groups, trying to get something accomplished. We've made slow, steady progress. Unfortunately, we got a little bit derailed by this whole COVID-19 thing. So there's only 6 months left in this legislative session. Sadly, my prediction is I don't know that we're going to get this across the finish line this time, but you better believe it, we're going to reintroduce these bills next session. And we're getting a little bit of momentum each time. Now, let's move on. This is Steve Menser's bill from the House, and this is Kristen Phillips Hill's bill in the Senate, and they are similar. Now, let's get on to a more controversial topic, and that's Act 112. Most of you who are watching this video know exactly what Act 112 is. For those of you who do not, Act 112 is a very controversial law that did pass into law in October of 2018, and there is a whole backstory behind it, but I won't waste your time. Suffice it to say, it was a political deal where some legislators were helping out another legislator, and Pennsylvania Medical Society knew it was happening and couldn't stop it. We cardiologists were not made aware of it as it was happening, and were only informed about it after it was too late. But so what does it say? Act 112 says that for any significant imaging abnormality, the imaging interpreter, i.e. the radiologist, if it's a radiology study, or more towards our concern, the cardiologist, if it's an echo or stress test or MRI or CT, is responsible to personally reach out to the patient, even if there's no relationship with the patient, to alert him or her to a significant abnormality. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a good thing, right? When you first hear that, you think, that's not a bad thing. Communication is good. By all means, communication is very important. The bad thing is that, as I've explained to many legislators, cardiology is not a black and white issue. Cardiology has many shades of gray. For instance, what if a patient has mild mitral regurgitation 2 years ago, and you read an echo, and now he or she has moderate mitral regurgitation? Is that significant? I don't know. Does that warrant sending a very frightening letter that simply says, call the doctor who ordered this test immediately because there's a significant abnormality? I don't know. Similarly, could a small area of inferior ischemia warrant a scary letter being sent out? Conversely, a patient may have a large area of anterior ischemia, but his or her cardiologist may know that the LAD has been totally occluded for a decade. making it an old finding that's unchanged. The point is that we cardiologists, and there's widespread agreement among our brothers and sisters across the state, should not be put in a position where we're having to make this decision. So we negotiated with the Department of Health, and they did delay this for a year, but now a year is up, and we are trying very hard to get this law reversed. Unfortunately, the legislators have told us in no uncertain terms that they will not repeal the law. So we're trying to do the next best thing, which is to amend the law. We've got Representative Joswiak from right in my county, Berks County, introduced legislation to amend the law. Unfortunately, this bill, Representative Joswiak's bill, 2103, is in committee, and the person who wrote the original law, Act 112, doesn't see any reason why it needs to be changed. So we are working hard to convince her that it needs to be changed. And then the COVID-19 thing came up. So we're still working on this. But so this is Barry Joswiak's bill 2103 to amend the flawed Act 112, and we're going to keep working on it. Let's quickly talk about a couple of wins. We were instrumental in getting a bill passed, which is now law, which requires all high school students to know the most basic fundamental concepts of CPR before he or she graduates. And here's a little article where Governor Wolf says, each additional set of hands trained to do CPR increases the likelihood that a cardiac arrest will be reversed. So this is a good thing. It's not going to cost the schools much at all. All they have to do is show a simple videotape or something of that nature. But for very little cost, it's going to hopefully teach the whole next generation the basics of CPR. Even just as simple as if somebody falls on the ground and becomes unresponsive, call 911. You'd be amazed that many people don't even know that. It's scary and it's sad. Now, another big win was Tobacco 21. We were also instrumental in getting these two bills, one's from the House and one's from the Senate, combined and passed into law as the Tobacco 21 law. And basically it makes illegal to purchase tobacco products or e-cigarettes and other vaping products under the age of 21. The only exception is for people who are in the military. That was a compromise that was sort of a take it or don't take it. So we took it. All right, now, a couple of things that are ongoing right now. We talked about the need to teach high school students CPR. A slightly different issue was raised by the Peyton Walker Foundation. Peyton Walker was a tragic case of a teenage girl who died suddenly from cardiac arrest. And her mother, who is quite a champion, and I've had the pleasure of speaking with on a number of occasions, has really made it one of her life's goals to increase awareness and screening and try to save some lives of high school students. It's a very noble cause and very commendable. She and Senator Mike Reagan from the York area introduced a bill that was flying through the legislature, basically not mandating that EKGs be required in high school students before they can play in sports, but strongly advising them to the point where the bill, which we do believe will become law, basically said that high school students and their parents need to be informed that they could die of sudden cardiac death and they could have an EKG which could save their life. Several cardiologists in Pennsylvania were concerned about this. Again, obviously, finding an abnormality and saving a life is wonderful. That's why we went to medical school or PA school or nurse practitioner school. That's why we do what we do, is to try to save lives. The concern that very smart cardiologists in Pennsylvania, including one who's one of the top sports cardiologists in the country and works for the NFL, is that the number of false positives from EKG screening will dwarf the number of lives that we save. And there will be unintended consequences of kids being told they can't play sports, and invasive testing and financial repercussions, et cetera, et cetera. So the compromise that we've reached with Peyton Walker's mother and with Senator Mike Regan is that we can't stop this from becoming law, and we understand the goals. We understand why it's going to become law. But we have mandated that the student and his or her parent must be given a fact sheet, which we are going to be involved in preparing. It's going to really give informed consent and basically give the statistics the likelihood that we're going to find a true problem. It's a very small number versus the likelihood that you're going to have a false positive abnormal EKG, and that's not a small number. And that may lead to you being prohibited from playing sports, you requiring more testing, which could be invasive testing, and you could get a bill for it, et cetera, et cetera. So it really talks about the risk-benefit ratio, which is what we do every day, is informed consent. So this is the bill, and we've put in some amendments. I won't bore you with this, but basically what it says is that cardiology has to be part of writing the fact sheet. And then this part says that the student and the parent have to read and sign this sheet that they've acknowledged that they understand the risks and benefits of getting an EKG. And there's even some language in there about, which I think is even much more valuable, training of coaches to be aware of what's happening and to at least start CPR when they're calling 911, et cetera. In the interest of time, we will briefly talk about venue shifting. Venue shifting is something that went away in 2002 that our friends, the trial lawyers, are trying to bring back, and we have so far, knock on wood, been able to block that. Short version of a long story is that Philadelphia, unfortunately, is probably the trial lawyer, the plaintiff slip and fall trial lawyer capital of the world, not just of the United States. And so an old trick used to be that if there was alleged malpractice anywhere in the state of Pennsylvania, the lawyer would look for any connection to Philadelphia. And if there's any connection at all, even if it had absolutely, positively nothing to do with the case, he or she could argue, and usually successfully, to have the case prosecuted or adjudicated in Philadelphia, where it's well known that the juries are more likely to come away with a guilty verdict, and the payout, the money, is tremendously higher. In 2002, we were able to block that, simply saying, using simple basic logic, shouldn't the case be adjudicated in the county in which the alleged malpractice took place? I mean, my goodness, it's like so obvious. And we were able to get that passed. And then about a year ago, in a shameful maneuver, the Supreme Court tried to secretly, well, maybe not secretly, but tried to, with minimal press, change this. And we were able to get wind of it and block it. And right now, it is still being blocked, but cross your fingers. And this is a big thing. For those of you who live in Philadelphia, you're going to be judged in Philadelphia. For those of you around the rest of the state, there's no reason for you to be judged in Philadelphia if you're accused of malpractice in another county. Informed consent is an issue that we are trying to correct, because traditionally, for several decades, a member of the team could get informed consent. For instance, I'm a non-invasive general cardiologist. I do a lot of CCU rounds. If a patient has ST segment elevation and I'm sending them down to the cath lab, I have been doing this job for about 25 years now. I am very qualified to discuss risks and benefits of the cath and the probable PCI. Unfortunately, a poor decision was made, again, by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court about 18 months ago, saying that the doctor performing the procedure had to obtain consent. We're trying to change that. We may or may not be successful. This is This is a request that I put in to the Pennsylvania Medical Society, which was approved. So the Pennsylvania Medical Society is working on that. So now let's briefly talk about House Bill 1811. And that's a bill that's also flown under the radar. My friends who are governors on the Board of Governors in other states have told me about this. This is a bill in which the Radiology Technicians Society is trying to incorporate EP techs and cath lab techs and other techs that aren't really radiology under their umbrella so that they control the certification and the governance. We don't feel that this is appropriate, and we certainly don't feel that this is necessary, since cath lab techs and EP lab techs have had their own governing body and their own certifying testing for decades. And indeed, we have already had conversation with the sponsor of this bill and sent in a letter stating our position, and we do believe that we will have cardiology techs exempted from this bill. We've had some successful discussions with Highmark. About a year ago, Highmark wanted to require that all echoes ordered by cardiology have prior authorization, which we successfully argued was ridiculous, especially when they admitted to us that, quote, cardiologists are pretty good at ordering these. Our statistics show that 98% of the time it's appropriate. So I actually said, so you're going to torture the other 98, you're going to torture the 98% who are appropriate because 2% are inappropriate. So they said, well, maybe we should talk about this, and they came back and changed it. So in the next 8 or 10 minutes until we wrap up, let's talk about the COVID-19 crisis. Rather, let's talk about advocacy during the COVID-19 crisis. We've all been working hard. We've all been living under a different standard of care. Our world has changed. Sure, the world has changed for those patients who unfortunately suffered this terrible, potent virus, and for their families, but it's also changed for us healthcare workers, doctors, nurse practitioners, PAs, nurses, respiratory therapists, all of us. We've all been working under a different standard of care. And because of that, across the country, there have been several states that actually had executive orders from the governor of that state granting limited medical malpractice liability for physicians and other healthcare workers during this COVID-19 crisis. As such, we, the Pennsylvania chapter of the ACC, in conjunction with Pennsylvania Medical Society and other sister organizations, really pushed the governor in April to grant us that, because several other states had and Pennsylvania had not. Here's the letter that we signed on to and we were involved in generating. We plainly ask now that you recognize the dedicated work of the physicians of this Commonwealth by signing an executive order granting medical liability immunity for care rendered during the time period of COVID-19 emergency declaration. And here's only a portion. This is only about a third of all the organizations that signed on, and here's us. So in early May, a few weeks ago, we got the good news that yes, indeed, Governor Wolf was going to give us an executive order. And I, for one, was thrilled. Sadly, about a half hour later, when we saw the order, we were very disappointed because, as you can hopefully read on this, the grant of immunity does not extend to situations where you're caring for non-COVID patients. So Governor Wolf, with all due respect, missed the point a little bit. Yes, we need immunity from inappropriate accusations of medical malpractice for COVID patients, but the care of non-COVID patients has changed dramatically. I did a similar talk like this, which is also listed in the CVI Heartbites collection, just about a week or so ago, talking about where have all the MIs and strokes gone. Suffice it to say, during this COVID-19 crisis, patients are not only social distancing from each other and trying to shelter at home so that they don't catch the virus, but they're socially distancing from the emergency departments. across our state and across our country, and yes, even across the world, there has been a dramatic decrease in the number of heart attacks and strokes, but a corresponding increase, literally a doubling or even more than doubling, of cardiac arrests and patients who were claimed or said to be dead at the scene when the paramedics get there. Patients are not coming to the ER, and that's the subject for another talk. But this is one of many examples where we healthcare providers are not practicing at the same standard of care that we were 3 months ago. The patients are sicker, mostly because of their decision. I, in my office, have several cases where a patient had called in and said, I just passed out, or I'm having chest discomfort, and we immediately say, hang up with us, call 911. You should not be talking to us, you should be calling 911. And they say flatly, I'm not going to the ER. We've had several in our practice alone. The point I want to make is this is one of many things that have handcuffed us cardiologists, and it's really not fair to hold us to the same standard to which we were being held 4 months ago. So you can't read this, but trust me when I tell you, this is a letter to the editor that I wrote in the Philadelphia Inquirer literally a week or so after the executive order came out, basically imploring Governor Wolf that we need a stronger executive order. Pennsylvania Medical Society is furious, and they have really been pressuring the governor as well. So far, the governor has not given us a better executive order, but here's the but. There's not one, not two, there's actually 3 brand new pieces of legislation in the Harrisburg legislature that have all been introduced within the past week or so, they're all slightly different, but they're all addressing medical malpractice liability immunity. House Bill 2546, I won't read you all this, but suffice to say it's looking for immunity from medical malpractice for all patients during this crisis. We're not looking for a free pass forever. And so-called gross negligence does not fall into this. Like an example of gross negligence is, God forbid you had a tumor in your left arm and somebody amputated your right arm. That's horrible. That's gross negligence. But we're talking about more, an 87-year-old comes into the emergency department and dies 24 hours later of cardiogenic shock due to a delayed presentation, and somebody says, oh, the cardiologist did something wrong. That's more of what we're concerned about. Here's a second bill, Senate Bill 1181, and there's going to be a third bill from Representative Gary Day, also from Berks County. This has not been introduced yet and does not yet have a number. So let's take the last couple of minutes and talk about what has the ACC done nationally. I can tell you, as Pennsylvanians, we Pennsylvanians are well represented in national cardiology advocacy. Of the approximately 18 or so members of the HAC, the Health Affairs Committee, which is the committee in Washington that makes ACC advocacy policy, 4 of those members are from Pennsylvania. And I will tell you that the Pennsylvania contingent is very good and very active. And so you are well represented in national advocacy policy making. I'm proud to say that our ACC, your ACC, my ACC, has had a lot of wins. And we want to credit the federal government for working with us. We in the ACC have partnered with the AMA, the ACP, with many other sister societies, but not to brag, but as a coalition, we have been successful, and we've been successful because Seema Verna, who's the administrator of CMS, and the legislators in Congress have all been very agreeable to most of our requests. And here's a brief list. I'm not going to go through and read everything. I do want to say that I want to point out one thing. A HAC, Health Affairs Committee conference call with Seema Verma and the rest of the CMS hierarchy. Mark Victor, a Pennsylvanian, was outstanding in communicating the need for telephone-only codes. As you recall, when the COVID-19 crisis first started, the big mantra was social distancing, stay home. We were trying to keep people out of the office. Unfortunately, a lot of people, and I've discovered firsthand, a lot of people do not have a fancy cell phone or a laptop. A lot of our patients simply don't have the ability to do a video. And so we as a committee, but most eloquently Mark Victor, we were able to convince ACC, and through the ACC, convince the government to give us telephone codes. So that was one of our big wins. Not only were we able to get telephone codes, we were able to convince them, at least for Medicare, for CMS, I can't speak to all the commercial companies, to reimburse the 3 levels of telephone codes equivalent to a level 2 follow-up office visit, a level 3, and a level 4. So those 3 telephone codes corresponded respectively to the levels 2, 3, and 4 office codes. We didn't want to be obnoxious and ask for a level 5, but we sort of compromised, and I thought that was very reasonable. So that's a big win for all of us. And hopefully now, as I'm hoping that the COVID-19 crisis is starting to resolve, hopefully this will be less of an issue. But this is just one of many wins. Now, in the last minute or two that we have, people always ask me, what can I do? What's important is we need many people involved. One of the more disappointing and frustrating aspects to those of us who really love doing this and really truly want to make a change is that sometimes we have trouble galvanizing people. And so any of you who watch this video who want to get involved, you can reach out to me. But here's some simple steps that you can do. Become educated, learn the issues. Go back and maybe watch this video a second time, and I've kind of outlined some of our issues. Get to know your legislators. Try to get to know who is your state rep, who is your state senator, who is your federal rep, and we all know we have 2 federal senators. Call or email your reps. It does matter. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, oh, you know, who am I? And I'm just one person. They're not going to listen to me. I can tell you, I have over the years developed personal relationships with several Pennsylvania state reps and senators and a couple of federal reps. Never really gotten to know a federal senator, but I can tell you, especially, I can tell you that the federal people do pay attention, but the state people really, really notice. Several state reps and senators have literally told me if they get 2 phone calls on an issue, 2, that's enough for them to say, boy, this might be something important. I better go back and reread that bill. That's all it takes. As you can see here, visiting a rep's office or a senator's office is the best. If you can take a half hour, I mean, they're usually going to meet with you for 10 or 15 minutes, but if you can carve out a half hour of your time, go sit down with a state rep or his or her staff for 10 or 15 minutes and explain the situation. That's the best thing. That's number 1. Most people don't have the time or the desire to do that. The second best thing you can do is call the rep's office and leave a 30 or 60-second message. They want to know your name, your address, because they want to know, are you a constituent? So whether you work in their district or you live in their district, you are a constituent. They want to know your name and your address, what bill number you are concerned about, and whether you're for or against it and why. So you give your name, you give your address, you say, I'm concerned about bill XYZ. I wish that the representative would vote for it because it's really important to help patients access to care. Here's my phone number or my email if he or she has any questions. And I'm telling you, they usually, I won't say usually, but frequently, they frequently do get back to you. So take 30 to 60 to at most 90 seconds. I put down in my slide 90 seconds. It's usually less than that call. Or at worst, email them. Communicate, it makes a difference. Now, people say, well, I don't know who my rep is. It's really easy. You just type in, as you can see, I showed how to do it. Find my legislator, PA, boom. As soon as you do that, you're going to get the screen to the bottom right. The screen to the bottom right, you literally have to put in your address, and it actually not only spits out your state rep, your state senator, your federal rep, and the federal senators, but it actually gives their phone number. I mean, it's so simple. It's not hard to do this. And if I accomplish anything today, I want to convince you that it's easy and it's important. In the last minute or so, I promise we're wrapping up here. One thing that we're not great at is supporting our PAC. The ACC PAC, which is now changed its name to something more clever called the HeartPAC. So we are now HeartPAC, but this slide is about a year old. We became HeartPAC a few months ago at the beginning of this calendar year. And I'm on the board of HeartPAC. I will disclose that. You know, some people find the whole PAC system a little bit distasteful. It is a little bit distasteful, but it's how politics gets done. And if we can support the campaigns of those legislators that are pro-medicine, and in our case, pro-cardiology, but most importantly, pro-patients, don't forget that, then we are in the best position to get things accomplished. And as you can see from this statistic, we are terrible compared to anesthesiologists, orthopedists, radiologists, ER doctors, et cetera, et cetera. We can do better. So here are 4 Twitter handles. The top one is obviously me. The second one is obviously our state cardiology chapter. The third one is obviously the Pennsylvania Medical Society. And the fourth one is not as obvious. This is the ACC Advocacy. So these are 4 very good Twitter handles. I don't do politics or talk about my family on my Twitter. I don't think that's appropriate, but I do try to update what's happening in the world of advocacy, particularly cardiology advocacy. Finally, we all know what happened 2 weeks ago. Sadly, one more case of police overreach, to say the least. That's an understatement. And look, I think that I speak for the vast, vast majority of people. We all want equality and justice and fairness. And I salute the leadership of my parent organization, the American College of Cardiology, for joining with the AHA to stand with the ABC, the Association of Black Cardiologists, and put out a statement basically saying that no one should be treated differently. We should treat everybody with dignity and respect. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, young or old. We should all be treated, you know, what do they say when we're in kindergarten? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. What we learned in kindergarten is still true, even at our older age. Finally, my parent organization, the ACC, you can see the mission is to transform cardiovascular care and improve heart health, and we're trying to do that with advocacy. Finally, just wrapping up, again, this is a joint production between the Pennsylvania ACC, but primarily the CVI. I am eternally grateful to the CVI for asking me to do this. If you have any questions, you email Mark Hartnett, and you can see his email address there. If you look across the bottom, you will see their internet address and a way to follow them on Twitter as well. CVI is a wonderful educational organization, really has done wonders in Philadelphia and southeastern Pennsylvania for advancing cardiovascular knowledge, and it's been an honor to be involved with them over the years. So finally, if you have any questions for me in particular, I don't have my email up here, but it's Waxler, AWAXLER @comcast.net, or you can always get me through the CVI website or the Pennsylvania chapter of the American College of Cardiology. Thank you so much for participating. Hopefully this has been a good use of your time. Have a good day. Stay safe out there and be kind to everyone. Bye now.